Two of the things that both you and I use a lot in Power Query are the combined and the expand feature that we have natively available to combine tables, expand lists, expand records, and we mostly use the built-in UI buttons to be able to do that. There is a combine button and of course there is an expand button. But just in case if you move past beyond clicking the button and take a look at what is behind the M language of expanding and combining, you are going to unlock many possibilities of making your queries happier and definitely more robust. In this video, I'm presenting to you exclusively the combine and the expand tricks in Power Query. You're gonna like this a lot. Let's start. Alright, let's just start with level 1, which is where I'm trying to combine the tables. Now, you must have done that a bajillion times. I'm going to show you 2 or 3 ways of doing it. In every successive method that I show you, things are going to get slightly more complicated, but definitely more interesting and more robust. Let's start. So, I've got this simple table right here. It's called combine tables. Assume that this data is coming off from Excel. We have the name of the sheet and we have 3 tables across of that. And if I just maybe peek inside of the table, you can see that in sheet 1, we have region, and the region has got subtables, city, New York, and state as whatever that is right here. Now, the most obvious way that people think of to expand all of these tables is to click on the expand button. So I click on the expand button right here. I uncheck the name prefix, city and state, good to go. If there are any more columns, you can click on load more. That allows you to load up all the columns, and then you're going to click on OK. So I'll just do that again. City and state, load more, nothing, click on OK, and the city and state gets expanded. Now this is the hard-coded method that almost everybody knows. From here on, let's just move on to level number 2, which is where we learn slightly more dynamic methods of expanding the tables. Now, what happens is that in the hard-coded method, which is absolutely fine by the way, you're going to see that the 2 columns that I just expanded. So if I go to the previous step, you're going to see that inside of the table, there are 2 columns, which is city and the state. And because those columns were available in the drop-down menu, I expanded those columns by checking on those columns, and those columns got hard-coded within the formula, city and the state. So tomorrow, just in case the city and the state headers get changed or one more header is added, this list right here is not going to automatically update, and your query is going to be stuck. So what do we do about that? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete this particular step. Just a quick second. And instead of hard coding the names of the columns, which is city and the state, I am actually going to grab the names of the columns automatically and then plug that inside of my list. Let's just do that once again. So I'm going to click on the FX button right here. I'm going to name this step as call names. And I'm going to say that, hey, here are 3 tables. No matter how many columns there are in the 3 tables, I want to combine them all, irrespective of the names, irrespective of the number of the columns. So I'm going to say, hey, from the source step, which is the previous step, go in this particular column called the region column. So I'm going to maybe move the square bracket and apply the region. Now I am only left with the region column extracted as a list, which has got the 3 tables. I want to combine the 3 tables. I can use the function table.combine right here, start at the bracket and close at the bracket, and I can press enter. Now, this is literally going to combine the tables without considering what columns are there in the table. So if I now press enter, you're going to see that the tables are combined and we don't have city and the state columns mentioned anywhere. The problem, however, is that we have lost the context of the tables. That means that if I go to the previous step, the 3 tables were right here, they got combined, good, but I have lost the context of which sheet did they come from. So I want to retain that context. So I don't want to combine the tables just yet. I want to just have the names of the columns present in these 3 tables. That's all that I want to have. So after the tables have been combined, I can just say, hey, I would like to extract the names of the columns. So I can say table.column names, start the bracket and close the bracket in the end. Now table.column names function accepts a table as an input. This table.combine delivers you a table. That's the whole table. For whatever columns there are, it's just going to get you the names, city and the state. Now this list, by the way, is not hard coded in any particular way. This is the list that I will plug that in another function and then I will get the answer. So I'm going to go ahead and just for sake of learning purposes, I'm going to click on the expand button once again, which is going to create the hard coded formula once again, which is where I will plug the column names right here. I could have also written the formula, but hey, let's just use the UI for just a quick second. So click on the expand button, city and the state, just as we did it in the past. Click on OK, click on insert. The step gets added. Now I want to move the step at the bottom because this is where I'm going to plug the automated column names function. So I'm going to say that, hey, table.expand column thing is going to be running on the source step, which is where I clicked on the expand button. So that's my first correction. So I will say, hey, this is going to be on the source step. Now, obviously it is going to run fine because the city and the state are the literal columns, but they are hard coded. So I'm going to delete all of this, city and the state and the city and the state. I will delete this, and I will, instead of writing a manually hard-coded list to an automated list that I have created, which is nothing but column names. So I'm just going to maybe go right here and call this as column names, close the bracket and press enter. Now this is truly dynamic. You can see that obviously no matter whatever columns there are, first of all the columns names are get pulled right here, and then the expanded region is all good right here. Now this is level 2. Let's just move on to the ninja level or the ultra dynamic level, which is where we don't really have to do this step to extract the names of the columns and then click on expand. It is all going to happen in just one single shot. Level 3 coming up. In case you're liking the video thus far, you're going to absolutely love my courses on Power Query, DAX, data modeling, and especially the M language, which is where I break down very complicated concepts around data cleaning and ETL, and then try to help you understand that how do you build or how do you frame logic to be able to build your solution on your own data. These are extremely structured courses, which is where I take students right from scratch, build up the fundamentals, and then we go on start talking about more advanced, more complicated problems. Hundreds of students have joined my courses and they have left some raving feedback about the course. In case you're interested to take your skills to the next level, I'll highly encourage that you take a look at the courses, and they will be super beneficial. Thanks so much. Alright, to begin with level 3, what I have done is I've created a new step called start level 3. This is the next level. And obviously I have inferred that step or referenced that step with the source step. So you can see that I'm actually calling the source step, which has got just the two columns, the sheet and the region, which has got these nested tables. Now, the same thing applies. I sure enough want to go ahead and combine all of these tables, and I want to retain the context, which is the sheet. How do I do that? Now, I'm going to use a function called table.fromPartitions that allows me to do all of that stuff in just one single step. So I'm going to go ahead and start writing something like this: table.fromPartitions. And table.fromPartitions asks you, hey, the column that you're going to have extra. So let me just help you understand. So if you just maybe go back to the previous step, you're going to see that apart from the tables that we have combined, we are retaining one column extra that tells us which is that name of the sheet where the tables are coming from. That's the thing. So table.fromPartitions function asks you that the extra context column should be named as what? So I can name that as, let's say, sheet name. You can call it any other thing. You can call it sheet also. But for now, I'm just going to call this as my sheet name. Then it asks you, hey, why don't you give me the name of the column, the name that you would like to provide, and the table in one single row as a list. Let me help you understand once again. So if I just go back to the previous step, now I'm saying that this particular column is going to be called as sheet name. That's my input that I've already done. Then it says that if I just go ahead, please give me this, which is the actual value that is going to be there in the sheet name column, and the table, and both of these should be in the form of a list. And then you're going to have a second list, and then you're going to have a third list, so on and so forth. So every list is going to have two parts: the value, which is going to be there in the sheet name, and the actual table that you're trying to combine. It doesn't really care what columns are there. It just combines that. Now, how do I convert the first row and the second row and the third row into lists that I can feed? I can use the function table.toRows, and I can just go ahead and say, hey, this is going to be the source right here, and good to go. Close the bracket, press enter, and we are done. Now, if you take a look at this particular output, we have in one single step been able to take a look at the sheet name, which is right here, rename the column, and also combine the two tables right here. The only caveat before you become a bit too happy is that while using the table.fromPartitions function, you have to keep in mind two things. The first thing is that as the context column that we brought, which is this particular column, just needs to be one single column. There cannot be 2 or 3 context columns. You'll have to do some very sophisticated bundling logic to be able to do that. However, the other constraint is that the values in the context column that you're bringing, which is the sheet column, these values should be unique. So if I have, let's say, sheet 3 repeated again with sheet 3 and the table, and if sheet 3 is duplicated, this is obviously going to give you an error because you're doing from partitions, and partitions cannot be duplicated, and that's the reason why it doesn't work. So in case you are trying to combine the data from Excel sheets or something, obviously the sheet names are going to be duplicate, and in those particular scenarios, this works absolutely fantastic. Let's just move on to the expanding logic and how can you expand the rows if you have a list provided. You will understand I'm going to discuss that in 2 different levels: static expanding and dynamic expanding of the rows. It's going to be interesting. So take a look. I'm working with a simple table right here. I'm going to call this as expand rows table, and in which we have 3 names: Chris, Charlie, and Casey. And I'd like to expand the names by, let's say, a roster position. So it means that every single person is supposed to travel 3 routes: route A, route B, and route C. And therefore therefore I'd like to have 3 rows for every single name. So what I can do is I can just go to the add columns tab, click on the custom column. Because the native behavior of the list is to expand in terms of rows, I'm going to create a list right here. So I'm going to call this as routes, and I'm just going to go right here and create a list using the curly bracket, within which I can just define my routes a.c. Now, if you already have a list right here, like list of routes, you can just have that, but make sure that this is a list. And once you actually click on OK, you're going to get a list. Now, because every single person is supposed to go 3 routes, if you click on expand right here, and if you just say expand to new rows, this is just going to expand that list column. And for every single person, you've expanded that 3 times. This is a very interesting way of repeating the number of rows. Now, obviously, we added right here A, B, and C, but you can add anything, months or quarters or whatever, and you expand the number of rows that you are. Level 2 of the expanding tricks could be done when you have custom number of rows, not the fixed number of rows. At the moment, we created a list for every single row, and that list was fixed for every single row, and therefore it got expanded to 3 letters A, B, and C. This time, if you take a look at my query right here, I've got this new step here, and I've called it as custom rows. And in every single row, I've got 4 as a number. Now, I'm assuming that when you're working with your own data, you can have a different number. So here you can have 4, 2, or 1, or whatever that is. But I'd like to have a different number of row. That means Chris is going to be expanded hypothetically 4 times. If there were a 3 right here, Charlie would have been expanded 3 times, and this would have been expanded, let's say 1 or 2 times. At the moment, this is 4, doesn't matter, but let's just take a look at the technique that how can you expand in custom number of times. Now, at the moment, we just have 2 columns, but you can have as many columns as you would like. Let's start. The logic that I would like to be able to build is something like this. There happens to be a function, and that function is called the table.repeat function. Here is a table, and I'd like to repeat the table, let's say 2 times or 3 times or 4 times. The times is mentioned right here. So if I just go ahead and write the function table.repeat and I start the bracket, here is the entire table, which is this particular table, and I'd like to repeat it, I don't know, like n times. So I just want to say, hey, I want to repeat this table 2 times. If I close the bracket and if I press enter, the same table is repeated 2 times. So you can see that now we had 3 names. Now we have got 6 names. So Chris right here and Chris right here is repeated, Charlie right here and Charlie right here is repeated, so on and so forth. You get the idea. Now, how can I use the table.repeat function? Obviously, this is not right, so I can just get rid of that. How can I use this particular function to be able to repeat custom number of times? To be able to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to consider every single row as a table. Let me help you understand and visualize. So this row is going to be considered as table number 1. This row is going to be considered as table number 2. And this row is going to be considered as table number 3. And if I can have this entire table broken into multiple sub-tables for every single row, and I can just repeat those tables. How many times? The number of times which is written right here. Let's just see how can we do all of that. So I'm going to go ahead, because I have to work at the row level. I will try to modify this particular row so that I get access to every single row. The first row, the second row, the third row, and I can manipulate that row from a record to a table. So it's going to be fun. Don't worry. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start to write a function that does that manipulation of tables to rows. So I could say table.transform rows. I'm trying to work with the rows of the table. So table.transform rows. Here is the table, which is right here. And here is the transformation function. So at the moment, I don't want to do anything. So I'm just going to write each underscore, give me the rows as the way they are. As soon as I press enter, because a row is nothing but a record, what I get is that a list, and the list has the 2 values of the record, the name and the custom rows, and the name and the custom rows, and the name and the custom rows. At the moment, what I have been able to do is get every single row into a record, but I don't want a record, I want a table. So I can just go ahead and say that, hey, the record that you have, modify that into a table. So I can say, hey, there is a function called table.from records, and I can start the bracket and I can close the bracket. And if I press enter, this is going to give me an error because the record needs to be wrapped in a list, and I can have the curly bracket for that. And now every single row, which was a record earlier, just a while ago, has been transformed into a table. So I can repeat this particular table, this particular table, this particular table. And now once I have the tables, I can repeat them. So I can use the function table.repeat, and I can start the bracket and I can say, hey, how many times do you want to repeat? So I can repeat it on a static number of times by writing the number. I don't want that. I want to actually pick up this particular value, and this particular value can only be picked up if you reference the record, which is referenced by the underscore, and pull apart the particular column called the custom row. So how do you do all of that? I can say that the underscore gives me the record, and then the name of the column was custom rows. So custom rows, I can write that, and that's going to be pretty much it. I can just close in the bracket. Hopefully that works. And now you can see that this particular table is repeated 4 times. So we just had Chris once, and now it's coming up 4 times. We had Charlie once, and now it's coming up 4 times because we have the number 4. Had it been a different number, it would have been different number of times, and that's fine. Now that we have the tables repeated, all I want to do is just combine those tables. I can say, hey, all of these tables, please combine it. table.combine, start the bracket and close the bracket in the end, press enter, and you now have custom number of repetitions for the rows that you have. This is awesome, and you definitely can't do that using clicking the buttons in Power Query. The next expansion trick is very interesting, and you're going to need this a lot of times. It is, if you have a list in a column, how do you expand it in columns? We just saw that in rows just a while ago when we had to repeat the number of times, the number of rows. But in case you want to expand it horizontally, how do you do that? So take a look. Same three guys, Chris, Charlie, and Casey, they have been stuck with us for a while. And we have the list right here, ABC, ABC, and ABC. But this time, the only difference is that I'd like to expand it this particular way. I'd like to have a column for A, a column for B, and a column for C. That's what I'd like to have. How do I do that? Now, obviously, once you have the list right here, you can click on the expand button. You can click on extract values, and then you can say that, hey, I want to have a comma as a delimiter. I can click on OK, and they all get stuck within a single cell. So they are combined in that single cell. Now I can just maybe go and split it apart in three columns. So A is going to be here, B is going to be here, C is going to be here. The only challenge is that just in case if this particular list updates and you get another one D or another one F, the list will not automatically go split it up. Now there are several ways of doing that. I'll show you an interesting way in which you can do that very, very easily. So let's just go ahead and delete this particular step, and let's just start to expand the list columnarily. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, since I'm just trying to work with this particular column, I'm going to go ahead and work with a function called table.transform columns, not the rows, but transform columns. I want to go ahead and take this list and convert it into another object that when expanded gives me more dynamic features. So I'm going to go ahead and say something like, hey, I'm just trying to work with table.transform columns. I'll start the bracket. Here is my table. And in every single row of the transformation, right now I just want to do nothing. So I want to say, hey, the name of the column is nothing but travel routes. So I can just say, hey, the name of the column is nothing but travel routes. So, and then what I want to do is nothing with that particular column. I'm going to close the bracket and press enter. This gives me the very list that I started with. What I'm going to do is I'm obviously going to combine the values of the list. So I can say something like text.combine. So I can say, hey, give me a list. So here is a list. And within the list, you can see that we have A, B, and C. I want to combine all of that A, B, and C with a comma. So I can say, hey, here is a list, and please combine all the values with that with a comma. And just as the way that you would expect it, it's going to give you the same answer as you had received just a while ago. Why is that not working? Because I have deleted the curly bracket, and now it just gives me A, B, and C. Pretty good. Now, you would still expect that I'm going to split it apart just as the way we did it when we were working with the manual example. But instead of splitting it apart by using the split by, I'm actually going to convert this A, B, and C into a table, which is dynamic, by the way. So that means that I want to have a column for A, and I want to have a column for B, and I want to have a column for C. And just in case, if I get D, the D column is going to be made automatically and not manually. So I'm going to go ahead and say something like table.fromList. So I will start the bracket, and here is a list that I have got it already. I can just maybe go ahead and convert that into a list because we don't have a list. We have a text right here. I can just maybe put in the list closure, close the bracket, and this is all good to go. Press enter, and we now have a table. And the table automatically got three columns, column A, column B, and column C. And again, column A, column B, column C. And in case there were more number of values, so if I just go ahead and go right here, and if I say this is not going to be until C, this is going to be, let's say, until E, now we should have 5 values. And if I just click right here, the table has got 5 values, and that's the beauty about it. At this structure, you're going to find yourself very familiar because in example number 1, I talked about table.fromPartitions function, which satisfies the need, which is where we have 3 unique values in the tables to combine, and you can use either the table.combine function or the table.fromPartitions function to be able to bring all of that together and expand the table, and you are done. So, and this is going to be expanded, by the way, horizontally, because tables expand like this and like this both ways. You just have one row, so they're going to be expanded like this. Moving on to the next very interesting trick that you're going to like it a lot. My next trick, which is super helpful in quite a few scenarios, is that how do you expand multiple lists together? Not a Cartesian join, but together. Let me help you understand what I'm trying to say. So I've got this simple table right here. We have the name, and against that we have route list number 1, A, B, C, and route list number 2, D, E, F. That's what we have. Now, if you happen to click on the expand button one after the other, you're going to make a Cartesian join. For example, if I just maybe click on the expand list right here, expand to new rows, this gets expanded. Now on top of A, B, and C, I am going to get D, E, and F as separate expansions. So if I click on expand right here and click on expand to new rows, for every A, there is going to be D, E, F. For every B, there is going to be D, E, F, so on and so forth. Let's just say if this is the behavior that you did not want, what you wanted, if I just maybe click on list 2, is that both of these lists, which is A, B, and C, and D, E, and F, which should be expanded simultaneously, creating just 3 rows for the value Chris. How do you do that? That's a kind of a tricky expansion. I'm going to show you how to do that. The very first thing that you need to do is you need to merge these lists lists together so that they create one expansion effect and not two expansion effects. The next thing that you need to keep in mind is that at the moment it might feel like, let me just do that manually, like pick up this list, let's just merge it together, which is fine. But in case you have, let's say, one more list appearing tomorrow, so I would want to create a dynamic effect that takes a look at, hey, how many lists are there? Are there 2, 3, more, whatever? And depending upon that, it merges all of those lists together and that creates that single expansion effect. It's going to be fun. Let's start. So I'm going to delete these two steps, expanded R1 and expanded R2. And the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a column right here, which is where you can visibly see how these two lists are being selected dynamically and how these two lists are being merged or created into a single table that is going to be right here. So let's just start. So I'm going to go ahead, and obviously because I'm trying to make a new column, I'm going to go ahead and start to write a function. So table.add column, and that's the function that you also get when you use the UI. So table.add column, and I can just go ahead and say, hey, which table are you trying to work with? So I'm just trying to work with list2 table, list2. And then it says, hey, what's the column that you're adding? Let's just call that column as T because we're trying to create a table. And for now, let's just write a stupid value, which is 1. And we get that extra column added, which is nothing but 1, 1, 1. Doesn't matter. That's where we are at the moment. Now, instead of writing 1, what I instead want to do is I want to go ahead in this particular row. And in this particular row, I want to take a look. Hey, are there any lists which are going to be expanded or not? And I want to capture all of those lists. That's the purpose that I'm trying to do. So instead of writing 1, let me just go ahead and write an underscore. Underscore means the first row. Then in the next row, underscore would mean the second row, and then the third row, so on and so forth. And if I just do that, you're going to see that the pseudo 1 has now changed to a record. And the record actually gives me access to the values of the first row, which is Chris, list, and list. The only problem is that I sure enough want to check for Chris. I sure enough want to check for the list, but I've got no business to do with the names of the columns. So let's just get rid of the names of the columns. So it becomes a cleaner environment to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, thank you underscore for giving me a record. Now I want to transform that record into a list because list does not have column headers. So I'm going to use the function called record.toList, which is going to take the record and convert it into a list. I press enter and the list is clean. We just have Chris right here, the two lists right here, which are right here. And now in that list, I can perform a check. Hey, are you a list? Are you not a list? If you're a list, stick with me. If you're not list, go away. So how do I do that? I'm going to go ahead and start to write a list selection function because I'm trying to apply a filter. So I'm going to say list.select. List.select, first part, give me a list. And here is a list. We already have that. And the list.select function, I'm going to say, hey, I want to build a check. And the check is going to be something like this. I'm going to say that, hey, why don't you go and pick up every single value and see that if the data type of the value is list or not. How do you write that? I'm going to say, hey, why don't you pick up every single value? Underscore is the value itself. And check using the is keyword, is that equal to a list or not? So is every single value is a list data type or not? And that's my check. I'm going to close in the bracket and press enter. Hopefully that works well. That is, I think I've just closed the bracket incorrectly because I didn't put the bracket right here. List.select has a bracket, and then there's a bracket closure, and then there's a bracket closure in the end as well. Now, if I just maybe peek inside of the filtered list, you're going to see that we are only landing up with the two lists, which is nice. And these two lists, I would want to work with them simultaneously. Now I'm going to convert both of these lists into a single table, and the tables can be expanded in one shot. This is going to be column number 1 of the table, A, B, and C. That's we saw A, B, and C. This is going to be D, E, and F. And this is going to be one table with column 1 and column 2. How do you do all of that? Well, I'm going to go ahead and say that, hey, these filtered lists that I have got using the list.select function is giving me two lists. From those two lists, make a single table. There happens to be a function in Power Query called table.fromColumns. Columns here means lists. So table.fromLists will pick up every single list. The first list and the second list will create a two-columnar table. The column names doesn't matter at the moment. So I'm going to go ahead and close the bracket right here of the formula, and hopefully that works. That works, press enter, and this has been converted into a table. Now you're going to see that we have A, B, and C, and D, E, and F. Both the lists combine into one single table with two different columns. This could have been 2 lists or 3 lists or 4 lists, doesn't matter, all into one single table. You can get rid of these two columns, pick up the table, pick up the name, either use table.combine feature, table.partitions feature to combine all of that and expand them into one single go. So now if I were to just do that manually for a quick second, so R1 and R2 deleted, table expanded, manual, fine, click on OK. You're now going to see that the Chris only gets just 3 rows of data and not 9 rows of data. This is pretty damn awesome. Let me know in the comments which trick did you find the most helpful, and the next video that I would want to watch is the tricks on the most used DAX functions. Just as the way you've liked this one, you're also going to enjoy that video a lot. I'll see you in that one. Cheers.